And the spirituality that we will be talking about tonight is part of our overarching topic of the value of the lives of Black and brown people. As Sheba Legend said, we've been fortunate enough to have co-hosted the show for the last couple of months. We've talked about the value of the lives of people of color. We've broken that huge topic up into subtopics. We started talking about image and the history of the stereotypical images that have been perpetuated in society. We moved on to self-image. More recently, we spoke about poverty and the lack of access to resources. And tonight, we're going to go into spirituality.
Right on. I just wanted to acknowledge our two co-hosts last week who spoke about mentorship, Mr. Mark Tuggle and Sean Lane. Thank you for joining us. They went in a little bit deeper from their perspective on, some possible solutions from as far as kids on a younger age, talking about grade school.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they're really important.
Yes.
I mean, we're all important. Critical. Yeah.
Right.
So I just want to thank you guys. So go ahead, man.
Yeah, so, spirituality, like a lot of the other topics that we've sort of tackled, is such a vast topic. And we want to start with just basically definitions of spirituality. And I think a good thing to do to start that, and I've sort of sometimes read a little bit information that we're sharing. When we had our strategy meeting earlier this week, there's a number of things that we came up with, and a lot of those things is kind of hard to memorize. I mean, usually I have the excuse of I've been so busy, I'm working, I'm in court, I'm doing cases. This week I was chilling, chilling. But
you said chilling.
Chilling. I'm in business mode.
That's
working.
Up.
Yes,
Yeah.
chilling. But this week I was chilling. But even so, I couldn't memorize all the information. So I want to start with just reading here, sort of the initial definition that we want to give of spirituality. And this definition comes from the University of Minnesota's Center for Spirituality and Healing.
So this is the spirituality definition for this forum, correct?
Yes. And there may be one more or two more that we go into, because one of the things that we discovered when we were looking into this topic was the fact that there are centers that actually exist to address spirituality, which I never knew about. And it's really interesting. There is the George Washington Spiritual and Health Center out of the GW School of Medicine. And there's the Center of Spirituality and Healing from the University of Minnesota, among other centers that we came across. But for the Center for Spirituality and Healing, this is where I'm getting this definition from. So they define spirituality as a broad concept with room for many perspectives. In general, it includes a sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves, and it typically involves a search for meaning in life. As such, it is a universal human experience, something that touches us all. People may describe a spiritual experience as sacred or transcendent, or simply a deep sense of aliveness or interconnectedness. Now, what's interesting about that definition, and maybe one or two of the other definitions that we will discuss, because in discussing spirituality, we sort of continue to define what spirituality is and what spirituality looks like. And most people probably think about religion when they think about spirituality. Now, religion is not all, of what spirituality is. It may be an aspect of spirituality. But spirituality and religion, even though in some spaces they use those interchangeably, they're not interchangeable.
No.
Spirituality is much more broad, much more inclusive than religion. Religion is an aspect of it. And one of the things that is interesting about this definition of spirituality is the fact that it really speaks to the human experience, to a sense of self, a sense of purpose, things that we all covered as we talk about the value of the lives of people of color, the meaning in life, and which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Spirituality, studies have found, is connected directly to physical health and well-being. Right. So there's a lot to spirituality.
Yeah. You know, go ahead, Miss Anka. I know you were.
Yeah, that definition of spirituality is a great definition. It encompasses a lot. And it actually encompasses another definition from an article that I'm going to be referring to as we talk about why spirituality is important, yes, which is the summer-fall 2005 issue of the Journal of the American Journal of Health Studies, the American Journal of Health Studies. And they did a study of African-American college students and how spirituality affected their behaviors, their success in school. And their definition is that spirituality is something that gives you a sense of personal purpose or meaning in life, which is encompassed in the definition that you gave. So I guess those will be our definitions for the show tonight as we go into why spirituality is important. And Ms. Legend, you were about to make a comment.
Yeah, you know, I can dig it. I like the spirituality topic. I'm really gung-ho for that. I don't, you know, I love the definitions that you guys have brought to the show tonight because it's right in line with the practices that I practice. Yes. You know, even, you know, I've, you know, personalized that that meaning. You know, and it's there, and that all-inclusiveness is available to anyone, and you can personalize. That's the great thing about spirituality. You can it's personalized. Like the playing ground is even when it comes to spirituality and the principles that are involved in it. You know, it's not like, oh yeah, I can pull one of those principles out of my ass and apply it when I want to. Right. It's actually something that I found that I set, and many other people set themselves up to receive, sort of like being in a state of grace, so to speak, you know. But, you know, it has nothing to do with religious or the dogma that's attached to religion, although it kind of teeters very closely because sometimes I know when people aren't able to explain certain things or aren't able to wrap their head around something which is out, you know, they're not able to control something, they want to really like attribute it to, they go right to God. It's God, you know, and God entails religion to many people around the world. That's right. I believe that God is a spiritual position as opposed to a religious position. I agree. But that's just my opinion. That's been my experience. Yes. You know, throughout my life. But let's continue, please. And what is the definition of spirituality? We've read that, and for me, breaking it down, I just want to answer that question because they came prepared today. And I just want to say, guys, I took my CUNY assessment test today. Oh, wow. Right, and I got through the test. Yes. I got there, great. I got through the test, and here's some more writing I'm doing. So and thank you guys. You're inspiring me to do more as far as improving the quality of my life. And I believe that played a big part in me showing up for that CUNY assessment test today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyway, I put right here the definition of spirituality. I customized it for me, is doing the next right thing. Because spirituality in that definition says it's an action. Yes. Involved in that. Yes. It's not, you don't discover it through osmosis. Right. Right? So, and that's been my experience too. So, yeah, for me, it's doing the next right thing. What about for you?
For me, it is one of the words that was used, and maybe I couldn't articulate it before, maybe reading that, but connectedness for me. It's connectedness to, I mean, however this sounds, to the universe. I think that spirituality personally operates for me in my intuition, in my sense of purpose and my understanding of things that happen, not only on a day-to-day basis, which we all think about, but also on, you know, like a long-term basis, the way that I see the world, and my connectedness not only to, when I say the universe, I mean other people, I mean my experiences, and I mean the sense that I have, I'll speak for myself, of a higher power and what that is, which is not necessarily religious. I know my grandmother's almost 100, And she always says, because when I was a kid, I went to church, and that was her thing. And she always says, she always questions me about, am I still going to church? And the answer is no. And it's no disrespect to any of the religions out there. I have a healthy respect for religious practice, but I definitely have my own sense of my own spirituality, and it is just connectedness to everything that I come into contact with.
Right on. What about you, Miss Anka?
Yes, for me, spirituality is also a sense of connectedness. For me, it's a sense of connectedness to the universe, to all living things, to other humans, and to humans that have come before us, to our ancestors. For me, spirituality is a way of life. It's not religious for me, and I also have a healthy respect for religion and for religious practices. But for me, it's intuition. Like when I'm separated from my intuition, then I know something is wrong and that I need to get back on track. So I think that it's about the things that happen day to day, how I live my life. For me, it's also about doing the next right thing. And it's interesting because one of the centers that you were speaking about talk about spirituality and how spirituality helps you cultivate compassion and empathy. And I think all of that is wrapped into spirituality.
Yes.
Because, and I love the definition, the example that they had for empathy. They said when you encounter an irritable coworker, a coworker who's just being irritable, you don't see them as a nuisance if you have empathy. You recognize that they are also under stress in the workplace. So empathy is kind of like looking at, and I believe we had a guest on the show before who talked about that, Marsha Bonner. What happened to you? Yes. What happened to you? Instead of, oh my God, look at what you're doing. What are you doing? And so I think empathy and compassion go hand in hand with spirituality for me, and paying homage to the people who have come before me. Definitely. And the people who are here now, interacting with everybody as though they are me.
Right, and that's amazing. Like, and that includes not only the elders, but everyone in between our elders who are alive and who have transitioned for me. And it just doesn't stop here with every human being. The practices allow me to align myself to receive information and the benefits of being mindful of other living beings of this earth. Sorry, I'm just human, and I know the arrogance level can really go into like really deep mold, thinking that I am the only form of life or intelligence here in this universe. Right. You know, when there are obviously living and breathing things in the form of beasts and plants and the ocean and the organisms. Exactly. And when we say the universe, it's all inclusive for me. So yeah, I just wanted to say also, how does that, for me, it translates into do the next right thing, even when nobody's looking. Right? You can start there. That's just a suggestion for me because that's how I started. It's a terribly challenging practice at times. So I really want to say something, right? But the intuition, that's a chance for me to tap into my intuition, saying, we know what's right. We know what's wrong, right? But do we choose to believe it? One, and do we choose to put it into action and take action? So there's a few things that must be done here. It just doesn't happen. It's a practice for me. So, yeah.
This reminds me of my grandfather, who was an herbalist, and before he would cut the bark for any kind of herbal concoction that he was making, he would say a prayer and ask permission of the tree to take the bark and explain to the tree why he needed the bark. And I think that also goes hand in hand with a respect for all living things, not just humans, animals, plants. And something that I wanted to refer to, the journal that I mentioned earlier, the study that they did of African-American college students, spirituality had an extreme effect on school success. The students who reported some form of spirituality, not necessarily religion, it includes religion, but not necessarily religion, some kind of sense of purpose or meaning, did better in school. they were more focused on their physical health. They were physically healthier, and their emotional well-being was also higher. And so the study actually concludes by using statistics to show that the mortality rate of persons who do not embrace any kind of spirituality is actually higher than people who have some sort of spiritual practice. And like I said before, it can be any spiritual practice. It can be you going to church and being a Christian, or it can be you feeling connected with the universe and being mindful, practicing mindfulness. Whatever practices, regular spiritual practices that you develop that help you maintain your connection with the universe.
Right on. So are we going to talk about why spirituality is important?
We are, and that's a segue or an indicator for me to read something else. Because I want to read.
Go for it.
Tonight I'm here about reading. And this, again, is something that is sort of a definition, but, and I spoke to Ms. Anker about this earlier. For me, it speaks to why spirituality is important. And there's a lot more that we have to say about why spirituality is important. Before I even get into the definition, I can say, again, from a personal level, because I know we try to speak to that, spirituality gives me a sense of balance. If I feel connected, to Ms. Anker's point earlier. And there's spaces where I understand that I need to reconnect and have more balance depending on how I feel about everything that's happening. And I think that ties into a lot of what we've spoken about in previous shows. When you talk about walking in your own power and having a sense of control, I think that all of those things are spiritual. And spirituality is just something that touches every facet of life. So with that said, this is a clinical definition from the George Washington Institute of Spirituality and Health, and this is at the George Washington School of Medicine and Health Sciences. And this is a definition that they actually pulled from the Association of American Medical Colleges. This was coined in 1999, and it says, spirituality is recognized as a factor that contributes to health in many persons. The concept of spirituality is found in all cultures and societies. It is expressed in an individual's search for ultimate meaning through participation in religion and or belief in God, family, naturalism, rationalism, humanism, and what I thought was most interesting, and the arts. So the notion of the arts being connected to spirituality is something that I really personally connected with and found really fascinating, because I was thinking about, along with everything else that was said, how, and I'll tell you this Sheba legend because I didn't say it when it was happening, but usually when we're preparing for the show, we're being mic'd and we're getting ready, Sheba legend will have some music in the studio to create a vibe. And when we came in, you were playing some Stevie Wonder. And I thought, you know, Stevie is serious business, right? And I just thought that set such a tone for the conversation that we were going to have tonight. And the particular song was Another Star, I think. It was Another Star, and it set the tone for the conversation that we were going to have. And it made me think about how music does that for me. You know, when you really get into all of the pieces that make up a musical composition and what that can do for you, that can be a truly spiritual experience when you connect with it. And it can also impact your vibration, you know what I mean, and how you move in a certain space. So that's what all of that makes me think about, and the fact that you had that music just filling up the studio when we came in was really significant for me.
I just got one question. Just one question for Mr. Dash. I want to know who gave you birth. I just want to know who birthed you.
Listen.
Oh, this guy is like, man, he just puts me on the spot.
I appreciate it. Listen.
It's like beautiful. Thanks, Mrs. Dash.
And Mr. Dash.
I just want to know who
Ruben
gave
and Sylvia
you
Dash.
birth. That's it.
No, listen, I appreciate you and that sentiment. But, you know, that's what we do for each other.
Right.
You know what I mean?
The validation is really important.
And it's important. Yeah, and it's also spiritual.
It is.
Yes.
And my mom, who we always shout out, Mom, Sylvia Dash, Ruben Dash, Dad, shout y'all out. Those people gave me birth and gave me a sense of, you know, self and purpose and always, just to big them up and give credit where credit is due, always discuss spirituality and things being spiritual and recognizing how each of us as spirits are connected to the universe and the spaces we inhabit.
Right on. I really have come, my life has come to grow into this practice of consideration and setting myself up for the possibilities. Like I can go different places and practice different practices with different types of groups who I don't really see regularly, but I have that choice in whether to participate in certain things that I know would more than likely improve my life quality, right? So if I go to like practice, I feel like going to church one day, right? I don't go to church, but sometimes I feel like, hey, I want to go check out that group, you know, that's practicing religion in that church because of the practices that they practice within the church. You know, they have someone read. I mean, there's no comments from the audience say, yes, so, you know, sometimes it's music. I love that. Sometimes it's animated where people are so full, their body's so full of joy, whatever it is they're shaking, probably stress, shaking off. Sometimes it's animated where they're dancing and jumping around, and sometimes they fall on the floor and start shaking and stuff like. I love being a part of that type of practice, those practices within that group. Not saying that I would go every week because maybe, you know, it would become I'm not that spiritually mature to practice those practices on a regular basis. I have my own practices that bring me to where I need to be. But I'm open to the possibility. So when things like Christmas comes around, and I'm not a practitioner of Christmas, I can join in with parties and be a part of, even though I don't practice those things. I don't have to like say, nah, I'm not down with that and not practice. I go for the sense of community. And that's what spirituality has brought me to. One of the things that spirituality has brought me to is the sense of community and the practice of that, practicing with other people who believe in different things, to be amongst them and be okay and still communicate and exchange information. So it's kind of interesting, you know.
It is. It really is. The sense of community that you can get from a spiritual community is so powerful. I was part of a spiritual community church years ago. It was a powerful sense of community that I got from the church, from the members of the church. The support was amazing. And I mean, I wasn't a Christian. I'm still not a Christian. And I went because this was powerful. You know, the community was amazing. And not only that, they were active in the community and are active in the communities that they serve, which brings us to our another point about how spiritual communities are very instrumental, oftentimes have been very instrumental in change in the community, as well as providing emotional support, sometimes even financial support.
Now, contemplative practice is essentially a practice that brings you a certain attention or focus, and it's everything that we were just talking about, right? And the whole idea of contemplative practice has to do with what we were speaking about earlier, which is that a lot of institutes like health institutes, medical schools, medical health-related institutes have recognized spirituality as an important component in not only someone's physical health and well-being, but also in how they recover from illnesses and respond to illnesses, right? And so contemplative practices are activities that guide you to direct your attention to a specific focus, often an inward-looking reflection or concentration on a specific sensation or concept. Now, I wanted to talk about that at this point because you mentioned yoga and activities, sport activities, activities that create that contemplative focus, prayer, meditation, and Ms. Ankra and I were talking about in the green room, journaling, which was something that we were both surprised and interested in.
Yes.
Ms. Ankra's revealed to me, and I hope she doesn't mind me saying, that she journals and has for years. I journaled in the past. I do some other writing now, but it's definitely...
He's an extraordinary writer.
Well, thank you. It's definitely a spiritual exercise.
Yes.
And I just wanted to inject that to kind of highlight your point about the activity, the active part of engaging in spiritual exercise.
Right on. Before we go to you, Ms. Ankra, I want to remind everyone that they're watching Masculine Us. My name is Sheba Legend, and I'm here with Mr. Kwesi Dash Esquire and Ms. Nefertiti Ankra Esquire, both practicing active attorneys here in the New York State area. The phone lines are open now. You can reach out to us at 718-237-1658. Hey, man, we're talking about spirituality tonight. What is that? How do you apply it? What does it, what does it do? What are the benefits? So give us a call, join the conversation, and we're just standing here like shooting it from the hip, from our experience. Ms. Ankra.
Yes, I just wanted to add a little bit to what Mr. Dash was saying, that spirituality has been shown to improve well-being of people, for example, who are chronically ill. There have been studies that have shown that people who are in the hospital, and if they have some kind of spiritual practice or a spiritual community or spiritual beliefs, they actually recover faster. And as we know, there are a lot of things that medicine can't explain, and this is one of them.
Look at here.
So spirituality is so serious, and our bodies are amazing. If you think about it, it's not just the physical things that affect our bodies, emotional things, mental things, affect our bodies as well. So it, follows that having a spiritual belief or being connected or something that gives you a positive feeling, would make you physically feel better. So I just wanted to add that.
I just wanted to piggyback on, no offense to pigs. Listen, the power of prayer. I've seen some stuff happen in my adulthood as a direct result of a group of people coming together and praying, right? I've seen people get out of hospital beds who, I'm like, what do you mean? I know people who are living with stuff, and it's just I can't explain. It's nothing that I can say to even begin to explain the power of prayer, which is not religious.
Right.
It's a practice. Right? And it's just amazing what it's done for me, because I believe someone prayed for me. I know a bunch of people pray for me, to keep me, safe, even for myself, So it's really important, and to keep me out of harm's way, not only from the outside in, but the inside out, because I make a lot of mistakes, to navigating my way through society, I make a lot of mistakes, and I need as much help as I can get. So prayer, I ask people all the time, please keep me in your breath, because I'm a firm believer in prayer. So, yeah. And where does that come from? History. I want to talk about more the history and role of spirituality in the culture of people of color.
Well, where does that come from? One of the things that we've talked about, obviously, and it's no secret that we have a very interesting place as people of color in the Western world, particularly in the United States, because of the actual history of this area and the fact that a lot of people of color were at some point in history subjugated and or brought from other places. And
we have a call.
Oh, we have a call. I'll hold my thought.
We're going to hold that thought, Mr. Dash. You put on the headphones. Hey, caller, who's this and where are you calling from? Hey, how are you? Can you turn your television down, please? Hey, Pat, how are you? Yeah, turn that TV down for us really quick. That's right. Let's go. Right. Let's go, Pat. Let's go. Right.
I'm never going to see them again in life. And that's not the final say. Those doctors did not have the final say. You know, I am a Christian. I believe in Jesus, and I believe that those prayers is what got her up out of that bed. And the first time she walked back into the church, everybody shouted. I think,
isn't that amazing?
There was a piece of us that was saying goodbye. So I just wanted to throw that out at you as I was listening to your program.
Really appreciate that.
And
thank you for calling.
Thank you.
Have a peaceful night.
Thank you, Pat.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Right on. That's what's up, guys. You know, listen, participate. The phone lines are open, 718-237-1658. It should be on the left side of your screen over there somewhere, if I'm not mistaken. And I just want to acknowledge Lillian in Master Control tonight. Thank you, Lillian, for getting us prepared before the show aired. And talk about more about the history and the role of spirituality.
One moment before you hold your thought, I just wanted to give a shout out to Deneen, who watches the show. I ran into Deneen, last week.
Hey, Deneen.
Hi, Deneen. So I just wanted to shout you out. Thank you for watching. Thank you.
Definitely.
Right. Yeah.
So the history to Pat, who just called, actually touched on something that's very important in talking about the history of spirituality. Not only the power of, the religious aspect of it, but you mentioned specifically the church. And one of the things that is historically significant about our conversation, or significant in our conversation about spirituality, is the role that the Black church has played in facilitating spiritual spaces. And we talk about that in the sense of there was a lot of praying and preaching and healing happening in those spaces, but there also was a lot of revolutionary organizing, planning, strategizing, and it was a safe space for a lot of people historically stemming not only from the period of slavery, but the different eras that have come after that, where there were spaces that had to be multifaceted environments that had to aid people of color. I mean, I'm talking about the Black church. There also, Ms. Anker can speak to more of this, spaces out of the Native American cultures that exist and existed, have existed in this continent, on this continent, in this country, where there are definite understandings of spiritual practices, and not only what they mean about people's purposes in the world, but the impact, as Pat just called and said, the impact that a spiritual focus, prayer, as you mentioned, can have on making things come about. It's deep stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I want to bounce to Ms. Anka, but I just want to mention that this so-called United States of America, a lot of the Americas, parts of these Americas was sacred land.
Yes.
And I have to believe that prayer and that power of the prayer, that the result of prayer is embedded, is ingrained in this land in a lot of places. And I just gotta say, man, like sometimes I go places in America, sometimes it can be right around the corner, whatever, and I feel something, and I stand there and I get into it. I can have a moment crossing the street somewhere in some metropolis across this great nation.
Yes.
And I wouldn't have known that unless I really practice these. I wouldn't be aware that it may be sacred land that I'm standing on, right? I wouldn't know that unless I had these practices in my life. I wouldn't have known that. I wouldn't even consider that. The intuition, the feeling, the moment, So I just wanted to put that out there because I've experienced that.
Yes.
Quite often. So, yes.
And I think that's important, a point you made about land and sacred land, because to Native Americans, land was extremely important. And the term Native American religion is actually a bit of a misnomer, because the Native Americans practiced, I guess, what you can call religion, even though that's not really the correct way to put it,
they refer
as a way of
as
life.
First Nation. I believe they refer to themselves as First Nation. Okay. I just want to make that real clear. Okay. Not that I'm bullying you or anything to say First Nation. Just want to acknowledge the correct term as put out by their sources as First Nation people. Yes. I'm sorry, Miss.
Okay. Yeah. They don't practice a religion per se. It's more of a way of life, and the way of life is the interconnectedness with the land, with the sky, with the elements of the universe, with nature, and it's something so simple as even when they're going to get food from the land. All of it is like there's sacred ceremony attached to day-to-day life and day-to-day activities, to the point that it's not really separate from living. It's almost as if living is an act of a spiritual practice in and of itself. And an example is the Osages, and I believe the way you pronounce it in the language is Ni-u-konska. And I guess the English version of that is the Osages. But they have a prayer where they refer to the universe, and they refer to the aspects of the universe. They start every prayer with the earth and the sky as being the two great forces in the universe that bring things to fruition, that bring things to life. And that is just an example of how the First Nation people felt very connected to the universe, and how all of that was interconnected with their day-to-day life, where it's not separate. I think that the Western or European view of religion is very different from that, very different from the First Nation view of religion, where things are separate. There's a time that you go to church, and this is very different from in studying the Native Americans or First Nation for this show tonight, the connectedness of almost everything. So putting on shoes and putting on the right shoe first and then the left shoe. Like these are some of the traditions that are connected with spirituality in various tribal groups.
I want to thank you for acknowledging First Nation brothers and sisters, and big up to Michael Braveheart out in California. Please heal quickly and without incident. Please reach out to me when you get a moment. The number here is 718-237-1658. Something's ringing, and it's not the phone. Mr. Dash.
One of the things I also wanted to add to that in talking about the First Nation peoples is the traditional African spiritual practices, how very similar in ideology a lot of those practices were and are, in terms of there not being a separation of the sacred and the secular. So meaning that spirituality is something that is a part of everyday life and everyday activities, and that's something that's also very present in a lot of the traditional spiritual practices that can be found in the different cultures on the continent, past and present. And I will also say that that is something that is definitely different from the European approach to religion. And again, it's different. That's not to make any commentary about the European religious structures, even though commentaries can be made. But it's not out of any disrespect. It's just different. And why that's particularly important is because a lot of the peoples of all of these nations that we talk about, whether here in the Americas or on the continent of Africa that were later on brought to the Americas, is that there was a transition in a lot of those instances from those traditional spiritual practices to Christianity. And a lot of the Christian churches, a lot of the churches you find in areas inhabited by people of color have over time blended a lot of the traditional spiritual practices and the traditional religious practices that were initiated on the continent of Europe. And a lot of that in terms of slavery happened through necessity. And with the First Nation people as well, through necessity, through just bringing their own understanding of the spiritual universe to the structure of Christianity, the religions of Christianity. And if you look at a lot of churches today, a lot of spiritual spaces, not only churches, other spiritual spaces that exist, because there's Christianity, there are also other forms of religions, obviously, Islam, shamanism, etc., Buddhism. You will see existing in the lives of people of color in the Americas today, ways in which they have merged those traditional spiritual practices with those other religions that they came into contact with over time.
Right on. Thank you very much for that detailed explanation. They've done their homework on this, and I just want to, I know Ms. Ankara wants to get appointed first. I just want to remind everyone we're almost 10 minutes out of time, and just want to let you guys know we'll take one more phone call coming in at 718-237-1658. You're watching Masculine Us. We're here every week, every Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. on the channel that you're watching right now, whether you're streaming it live or you're looking at it via your cable provider. We're usually in box number 3 every Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. And yes, we are live every week. My co-host tonight is Kwesi Dash Esquire and Nefertiti Ankara Esquire, both practicing attorneys right here in the New York State area. So we have a few minutes. we're about 7 minutes out, so...
I just wanted to add a point to what you were saying, Mr. Dash, about African traditional religion. And on the personal note, my father was actually a priest in the African traditional religion, and that's how I was raised. And I'm saying religion because, again, as in the First Nation, when we were talking about the First Nation and their spiritual practices, religion is also a misnomer because very much like the First Nation spiritual practices, the traditional African religion, for lack of a better word, is really a way of life. It's a way of life. It's paying homage to the ancestors. It's living in your own truth, and it's doing the next right thing to other living things around you. So it's very similar in that regard.
Right on. And I just want to close with some suggestions, number 4, if that's okay, to our viewers on how to incorporate spirituality in their life. Let's do a checklist here.
Well, one of the things that you can do is, as we discussed earlier, find a spiritual community. That could be a church, but it might not necessarily be a church. It can be a community that recognizes spiritual practices, or a community that engages in activities that help you to be spiritually fulfilled. The things that we also mentioned, that when we talk about finding a spiritual sort of center, things like yoga,
Yes.
meditation, journaling, those things, the arts, expressing yourself in the arts, are ways in which you can find your spiritual center. And those are things that I work personally to engage in.
Right.
That's something I personally, I was an avid practitioner, I guess, of yoga for years, and now I have to, get back on doing yoga, because it extremely is, it's extremely calming for your spirit and your body and your mind. And so that's something that I would do personally, is yoga, meditation, and I think music plays such an integral role in spirituality in general. And what comes to mind for me is in the traditional African religion, when you have priests dancing and being connected to the ancestors that have come before them, there's drumming, there's music, and that music takes on an otherworldly quality. And I think the reason why it does is because those of us who are listening to it, it moves us. It moves us, and it moves the dancer. And I think music it's an amazing way to appreciate the world around us.
Yes.
Appreciate yourself, and just it's a great way to just take a moment out of the craziness of the world in general.
Yeah.
Indeed.